All right, hey everybody. Adam Scott here for D&D Club, and I'm excited about this stream I'm going to do today because I've been thinking about this for a while. The topic I want to talk about today, and we'll circle back to this a few times as people get engaged and ask some questions, is this idea of how we can create more meaningful characters when we play. And so this is directed and useful toward, this is going to be a useful stream for either players who are new players or players who have played before and are looking to find a way to get their characters to come out with a little bit more meaningful connection in real life. So today we're looking at the idea of this concept I call introspective character creation and then connections to mythology. And I want to start this off by focusing on like what are the objectives? Like what's the whole point of doing this? So at the end of this, I want players and people in the audience to be able to have some techniques to be able to create characters with more meaningful outcomes in real life. And so there's a little bit of context that needs to be kind of shed on that. So where does this come from, and what's the whole point of doing this? So as a DM and as a long-term classroom educator, I see a lot of people looking at role-playing games and RPGs in general, or D&D specifically, as a way of connecting and a way of trying to figure something out about themselves. And they might initially be drawn to the game for reasons of play and engagement with killing stuff, and that's awesome. That's what's attractive about role-playing games to so many people. And the other thing that might happen is once they start to engage with it, they're actually looking to overcome some things in their own lives that may be a particular challenge to them. And that's the whole idea of playing through an avatar. We have an avatar that we take on when we go into role-playing games, and that avatar, it interacts with the world in our stead. So that avatar's interaction, it doesn't have to replicate exactly what we are and what we think and what we do, but it can work on some of the things in our stead, in place of our human being selves. This week, kind of distilled this down, and I was thinking about the idea of why do we play? Well, why do people play RPGs? To me, it's all the, I don't want to say surface level stuff, but it's all the things that come to mind initially when you first talk about it. Role-playing games are fun. Playing D&D is a fun thing. You sit down with your friends, and it's going to be an enjoyable time because it's play. It's a form of social play, and it's usually a really good experience. A lot of players I talk to really enjoy the narrative elements of the game. They enjoy the idea of coming together and telling a story. A lot of people who have a creative writing background who really enjoyed English class or literature as they've gotten a little bit older come to the game with the idea of being part of a narrative story that's unfolding, which grabs their interest. And I think I've been doing a lot of reading and thinking about this. I think there are much deeper connections to that connect to our human searching for mythological connections. So I want to get into that a little bit later and see how we can use that to support our goals as players at the table. Other things, killing monsters, leveling up, magic items, all the stuff in game that attracts people and is the reward, the incentive, not to mention the ability to exert power on the worlds that we're in. I think that's a really powerful draw for so many people. And I know that a lot of players, all they want to talk about is what level am I? What abilities do I get? What magic loot am I going to be able to find this next session? I was just talking to a DM the other day who said that they spent almost 2 hours of their 3-hour session just looting something from the previous game. They were like looting this dragon horde, and they ended up just looting the whole thing, looting it for 2 hours, and then rolling out random loot tables, and they were just like so excited about all the stuff they got. So I think that's a very powerful motivating force, because in a way it gives our characters the ability to interact more effectively in the game world, but it also gives us a sense of what I like to call power fantasy, the ability for us as human beings to exert some type of power control on an environment that maybe we haven't had before. And lastly is making new friends. That's something that definitely plays into the idea of role-playing, and I think it's something that is pretty ubiquitous throughout the hobby. So then I did some more thinking. I said, okay, well, why do we actually play? And these are the things that I've figured out through looking at the many groups I've run, the players I've worked with, I worked with lots of young people, I've worked with lots of older players, and I've kind of distilled down what I see at the table. And so my assessment of this is we actually do play for fun. Human beings need to play for fun, and that's a really important role of role-playing games. And remember, the whole point of this is to figure out how to take your character and use introspection and mythology to create a more effective character. And we'll get to that in just a second. So there's self-discovery is involved, I think, in a very large part with gaming and role-playing specifically. So I'm going to talk more about that in connection with some ideas of Joseph Campbell's. And then social skills, confidence. I think people really are trying to work on those in our society today because of so many reasons. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Personal growth, whether it's social skills, social confidence, or just trying to do something new in the game world that may be an obstacle in real life. And there's actually ways to be very intentional about that as a new player. So if you're a new player and you're watching this, or if you're a new DM trying to figure out how to help players and support players, because really I think DMs play a very supportive role in the game world, there's definite techniques you can use to do that. So we'll get into that too. And then making new friends. I think a lot of DMs really, or a lot of new players and DMs really want to make new friends, and that's important. So there's a lot of commonalities between why we think we play and why we actually play. And then there's also some underlying things that maybe we're not quite as cognizant of. So I read this quote this week, and this really stuck out to me. And I've had Joseph Campbell's Hero with 1,000 Faces on my to-read list for a long time. I approached it several years ago, and it was a very hard book for me. I couldn't really get into it. I knew that what was in there was really important. Star Wars and George Lucas really based, George Lucas was a student of Joseph Campbell. And so Star Wars is based on the ideas of Joseph Campbell's thinking in terms of analyzing mythology throughout human history and performing comparative mythological analysis. So I know that the work is important, and I knew Campbell's work was important to the work that I do, but I couldn't really access Hero with 1,000 Faces when I was younger, just because I don't think I had done the prep reading. I think I was at a time in my life where I wasn't ready to see what Campbell was talking about. And so I picked it up recently. I've been doing a lot of reading, religious reading on various different religious mythologies, historical mythologies from different cultures. And I finally picked up Hero with 1,000 Faces again. And I'd say it makes a lot more sense now that I'm a little bit older. And so Campbell includes in this quote really stuck out to me. He says that it has always been the prime focus of mythology and rite to supply the symbols that carry human spirit forward in counteraction to the constant human fantasies that tie it back. So what he digs into is that we all have things in our lives that encourage us to retreat to a place of safety. As human beings, he talks a lot about how we're connected, how we think. Let me rephrase that. He talks a lot about how Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung and their psychoanalytic structures are applicable to why we have obstacles in our lives and to why human beings and people have challenges in their lives that maybe they can't overcome, and that we, in essence, have created mythology as a surrogate for our own inability to act or face those challenges directly. And a lot of it goes back to the idea of we have these fantasies that tie us to the safety of childhood and the safety of our home life and the safety of our initial relationships with parents, or the dysfunction of those initial relationships. And that we've created mythologies throughout human history to help us understand and break through those challenges, the separation from those safe places, and also to deal with the challenges of just being a person. He talks a lot about the arc of life, where for the first half of our lives, we are trying to figure out how to live life and how to live and find love in our lives and be very present as a human being. And in the second half of our life, as we have hopefully conquered love or found ways to love ourselves and connect with others in this transcendence of humanity, we then begin to prepare for death. And there's this ever turning wheel of our thinking in humanity that goes on for time immemorial as we as individuals welcome ourselves into the world. We try to grapple with the struggle of finding love and connection and separating from the safety or the dysfunction of our youth. And then as we get older, realizing that we're in the second chapter of our lives, the closing chapter, and then preparing for eventual death. And how we do that is really challenging. And what he says is a long-winded way of saying, Campbell says we use mythology, and human beings across the world have used mythology as surrogates to help us grapple with what is almost the ungrappleable, the knowledge that we are all finite, that we will all perish somehow. I was listening to a sermon this weekend, and the priest said that we all live with the knowledge that we're going to die, and that's really heavy stuff, and that's really, that's big. And so Campbell's connection to that would be that we use mythology as a way to stand in and provide examples for how to conquer those subconscious fears. It's the things we know, but we don't really know how to face. And I think if we are specific and deliberate about how we approach this, we can actually gain something as role players in this space. We can find ways to use our understanding of mythology, to use our understanding of what a myth is, and then approach it in a way that's productive. So I want to cycle forward here. These are some things that people have said and some thoughts I've had from my social media communities over the past few weeks. And the idea is that I asked everybody kind of like, I broached the subject of role-playing in mythology. I said, well, what do you think? And the community really gave a lot of feedback on everyone wants to be the hero of their own story. And it's this, and the idea of role-playing and this connection with myth is it's the same reason we write stories. We want to discover ourselves. Self-discovery was emphasized several times. And then this concept of ritual storytelling, which is as old as humanity. And these were things that I seeded independently and asked of people. And then I was looking through Campbell, and I saw so many connections between the responses on my social media communities and the works of Campbell. And Campbell's Hero with 1,000 Faces was written in 1946, 47. So it was written a while ago, before all this modern technology was in place, and before we saw the rise of the Marvel comic universe and Disney's acquisition of Star Wars, which is almost ubiquitous in our life, and the Lord of the Rings movies, which takes the books and puts them into our popular imagination. And now you have the Lord of the Rings show and Wheel of Time on Amazon. So you have all kinds of popular mythology that is very present in our lives. And understanding how we integrate that and grapple with that is really challenging, and it's really important. It also can be really beneficial. And so that's what I'd like to talk about, is how to integrate those things that are beneficial to our lives, and this struggle with mythology that we use as a surrogate to overcome things in our life, fears maybe we can't face, things we can't really grapple with. I want to talk about this in the context of using those things to overcome those challenges. Hey, what's up, bearded nerd? I demand a character that uses their beard as a weapon. There's got to be something like that in here. Let me put it up on the screen here for the recording. There's got to be something like that in mythology. I don't know if there is. Maybe. I feel like there's maybe some biblical references, even though you have the power of the long hair of oh my gosh, the name, I'm blanking on the name. The guy who gets his hair cut pulls the temple down on himself afterwards when he asks God for his power. So terrible. I should remember that, but that's okay. Bearded nerd might be able to help me. But yes, bearded nerd, maybe we need some characters that use their beard as weapons for sure. Other things from the social media community this week that people were talking about is that RPGs resonate because they're building this modern mythology. And this is the topic that I really appreciate and want to get into. Samson and Delilah. Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, I was like, Jezebel? I'm like, no, it's not Jezebel. Yeah, Samson and Delilah. Thank you. So thoughts from the week. RPGs resonate because they are building a modern mythology. And I think that we are really looking to that in our modern culture, because we see a receding of traditional mythologies, that the role of that religion has played in Western culture for quite a long time. It's beginning to recede. And that's not a value statement. I'm not trying to say that, hey, we all should be religious. It's not the point of this. The point is to say that we need mythology as a person, and we need ways in which to grapple with the things that are almost ungrappleable, the things that the evident fact of our physical death, and then also the idea that we are trying to escape our childhood traumas or our childhood safety, and then find love and acceptance in our world and connect with other human beings, and then also eventually realize that we will perish, and so that we need mythology to do this. Role-playing games to me are very much that. So when we take our avatars into the game world, let's connect it up to this. When we take our avatars and our characters into the game world, we are involved in the process of actually creating myth. We are not just telling a story. I mean, we are telling stories, but we're involved in building a mythology in our own minds. We're telling a story, and if it's done deliberately, it can actually be a very positive thing. So I would encourage players to do some pregame preparation. I would encourage them to think about, why do you want to play? And not just be on like, hey, I want an elf. I want to be an elf. Like, that's cool. That's awesome. Like, I would love to be Aragorn from Lord of the Rings. I'm not. He's way better in all respects than I am as a person and character. But the idea of why do you want to play? Go one level beyond. Go one level beyond. Like, I just really want to be a halfling, or like a tiefling sounds so awesome. I would encourage players to ask that second question of, well, okay, if you want to be a tiefling, why do you want to be a tiefling? What about a tiefling is appealing to you in the context of the D&D world? And even if you say something like, well, I think they look cool. Okay, well, why do they look cool? Is it the fact that they are different from maybe traditional norms? Is it the fact that they have the capacity to surprise people, which is something that's unexpected? And the more you do that pre-prep work, the more you're going to understand your motivations for playing, as well as what your character's capable of in game. Oh, here we go. Bearded's got something to share. Comic books that took the place of mythology in the US. I think TTRPGs do that now. Absolutely. Bearded, I don't know if you're in a place where you can stream, dude, but if you are near a computer and you want to jump on, man, I can send you a link and you can join me. You don't have to, but that's an invitation because I thought it would be fun to do this. Very easy. All I got to do is send you a link, you click, and you just be on the air with me. No pressure, though, because I think you have a lot to add to this. So definitely comic books that took the place of mythology in the US. I think TTRPGs do that now. And I think that's very true. I think that is, I think that's what this hobby does for us. And I don't want to get preachy in terms of saying like we need religion in our lives, but when religion receded, we looked for things to, I should say, the popularity of religion and the among many Americans, we have looked for things to try to give us a chance to understand the story of humanity, the story of our lives. And that's something that's a very, very tough thing. It's like, how do you understand being human? Bearded says he'd love to join, but daughter and him are heading to Costco. All right. Hey, I get it. I totally understand, man. Just wanted to give you the invite. All right. I'm going to go back here and talk to this. So what are some of the next part is, what are some of the challenges you're facing in your own life? As I've played more D&D and as I've played more role-playing games, I start to ask myself this question whenever I come to the table with a character. And I don't want to use it as a group therapy session. Like, I don't think my job, especially as a DM, is to say like, I have my stuff and I'm going to work it out in the game world and everyone else has to deal with it. And it can help you understand the motivations of why you're playing and give you the opportunities to build better relationships. For example, I have known players who are trying to exert more power in their own lives. And we all go through this. We all are trying to have some sense of control in this world that's very confusing and always constantly throwing obstacles in our way. So we need to find ways to exert power and control on it, because that's, I think, most of our drives are to have some sense of stability in our life. So the players that I've seen do this, there's two ways to go about it. The idea that they're looking for more power and control over their life, and then they set to actively check that in the game world so that they don't become an overbearing force upon other players, but actively seek to find ways they can support and uplift their teammates. And say, okay, well, my other players, I'm going to figure out ways to support them. And what's interesting is the support comes back to them at the table, and then they thus have more agency. They have more agency at the table. But what's interesting about this is that is a skill that crosses the boundary of the game. It's using that mythological interaction in the game world of having your character simulate different actions, and then it carries over when you step away from the table. You have the same practice you can enact and then use it as a way to govern your own relationships. If you're someone who's saying, well, I have this idea of wanting to exert power in the world and I'm struggling with that, but if I learn to check that and defer to others and invite them into the fold and say, hey, well, how can I empower you? It actually comes back around to you. It can come back and empower you in your own life. And this is just what I've noticed with role-playing games. If you're just joining us, we're talking about how role-playing games and certain techniques can give you more opportunity. Here, look, what the heck did I title this? Here we go. How we can use introspective character creation in mythology to build better characters and actually get more out of role playing and gain and grow in real life from the process of being in RPGs. So the other counterpoint to what I just was saying about characters that have power fantasies and then who want to exert more power in the world, it can actually go a different direction in the game world, where they hyper focus on that drive to the exclusion of others, to where they're focused so solely on creating their own individual mythology in the game world, where they're playing in essence a one-player game, that it can become toxic and it can become destructive. So the point of saying, what are the challenges you're facing in your own life? It's not to say that you need to replicate those or go through a group therapy session while you're playing a role-playing game and say, okay, well, I have a hard time with exerting power and control in my own life, so I'm gonna do this and work on it in the game world. But it governs how you control your avatar, and how you control your avatar affects other players, and that directly can impact your social relationships. So it can be an impeding factor or a benefiting factor in how you can grow with others and how you can build those social connections through this kind of shared mythology. Remember, mythology, as Campbell talked about in A Hero with a Thousand Faces, is the surrogate. It's the surrogate for us grappling with the totality of being a human being and things we do not understand. And we do have science. We have the idea of science. And what I actually postulate is, we've seen, this is not my unique idea, but as we've seen the receding of religion in our world and the ascent of science is something that we look at to hold on to, what we're really doing is we're trying to find things that give us certainty in the world. And my personal opinion is we'll never find that, because being a human being is really complicated, and there's so much we don't know or understand. No matter how much we try to search, we just don't know. Heisenberg uncertainty principle replicated out 1,000, factor of 1,000 into the world. And so we try to use mythology to overcome these things. It's okay. This is a story I can understand. And the myths that we tell, they are not literal. The historical myths, the myths of religion, the myths of the Greek pantheon, the Roman pantheon, Epic of Gilgamesh, these myths are not literal. They are telling truths that we need to have expressed in a way that we can understand as human beings, because we have to face the knowledge that we are going to die as human beings. And so we need things to stand in. We need things to stand in for us to help us understand them in a comprehensive way, in a way that we can access, and we can understand stories. We can understand archetypes of struggle and dragons and ogres and trolls. We can understand these archetypes and how they create fear in our own lives, and we put them in place of the fears that we don't really want to address. We put them in place of the things that we're actually really scared to focus on. So Campbell talks a lot about dreams and connects it to Freud, and how there's a lot of connection between mythology and the deep subconscious, and that mythology allows us to work on the deep subconscious. My take on all of this is that we're seeing a resurgence of D&D and role-playing games in general, because in general, we are, as societally, we are really struggling with many deep unconscious things in our world. We're struggling with social alienation. And I want to bring this up because these are some things that I was discussing with my community this week on social media. Also, if you're just joining, I'm glad you're here. If you have some questions or comments on the topic and you want to get involved, please let me know. I always appreciate when the chat gets involved, because honestly, it's much better than just seeing me talk for an hour. So we talked a little bit about this. Everyone wants their own stories. So I touched on this briefly a second ago, that RPGs resonate because they're building a modern mythology. Bearded Nerd brought this up, that the TTRPGs kind of do that for us. They create this modern mythology, and they stand in this place. They provide that story for something that helps us understand the things that we can't understand. That is the role of myth. That's the role. Any religion is a mythology, and those religions help us understand the world that we can understand, because we're humans, and we're trying to grapple with the ungrappleable, the knowledge of our death, and the fact that we have to escape the safe place or the traumatic place of our birth. And so it's this idea that somebody brought this up, that it's an ancient art that is pushing back against our spiritual alienation. And that to me is really stuck. That's why I'm focusing on that, because we have this practice of coming together through storytelling, through building a character and saying, I want to create a story. So many players I talk to, new players, older players, dungeon masters of any kind, they come to the table and they're like, I want to tell stories with people. I'm yearning to connect with others. And it's like I want to be around the campfire just telling stories with everybody. And it's because we have these modern devices that we've replaced our connections with. It's because we have the focus on the hustle culture where we got to keep going. We've got to do things nonstop. There are all these things that have removed us from what it means to be a person. what it means to grapple with this simple arc of life, the grinding wheel of time, the cycle of our growth into being a fully formed human that has been in touch with our essence and our character and come to life confidently with those ideas at the fore, and then understanding that our time will pass. So it's this idea of employing this ancient art to help us push back against this alienation, to help us to grapple with things that maybe we haven't fully grappled with as a person. Other things people talked about and that were discussed this week is that we've been kind of removed from this deeper mysticism in our lives. We are having a hard time connecting with it. And if you look at the media environment today, there's narratives everywhere. There's dominant narratives, there's sub-narratives, there's left, right, center. And I'm not trying to go on a political tangent, but we have narratives, many of them which we have chosen for ourselves through our own media consumption and through our own story creation. So in a way, through our media consumption, we are creating our own stories. We are creating our own stories that allow us to grapple with our own perception of life. And I want to throw out that I think there's also the challenge of many of us are not grappling with the underlying challenges of the mythos of our childhood, of our initial traumas or our initial safety. And we have not been able to break through these. It took me a long time when I was a young person to realize how to become a fully formed person. It took a lot of struggle. It took a lot of soul searching, a lot of being awkward and being anxious. And it took time for me to understand that I had to accept those things as part of the struggle of my personhood, of my being as an individual. Some of the things that mythology does, or one of the specific things that mythology does, is it serves as that surrogate to allow us to conquer those things or to grapple with those things. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that may be why I've been fascinated with mythology for most of my life. Since I was a young kid, I was fascinated with Star Wars. When I read Lord of the Rings the first time in high school, I was like, this has changed my life. And I didn't think it was I didn't enjoy the book as a storytelling. It wasn't as exciting as some of the books I'd read, but it felt like I was opening a page into something much deeper. It was a story about a story. It was a story about a human. It was a story about humanity. And it about friendship, about the things that really matter, the things that I was grappling with as a person, that we all grapple with as people. So these role-playing games that we play and the characters that we bring into them, they give us an opportunity to participate in what I think are what is the one story, what Joseph Campbell calls the monomyth. And the monomyth is the timeless tale that we all experience through mythology and all human cultures have told throughout time. It's the idea that we have all created stories. Every human culture across the world, throughout almost all of human existence, has created stories to stand in the place of the fear that we face, becoming our fully formed selves, of stepping away from the space that we are born into and the relationships we are born into who we are as a person. And then also mythology has given us a pathway to grapple with the things that are challenging as we then recede from life and as we move into the next stages. And so when we take these characters into the game worlds, we are actually wrenching ourselves away from the technology, the alienation of modern society. And if it's done deliberately, we are actually allowing ourselves to participate in what can be this mythological creation process. And some people might tell me, like, you're just crazy. What are you talking about? This is nuts. Like, this is off the wall. I just want to play role-playing games because I think they're fun. And that's cool. Like, if you're just like, I want to play role-playing and I want to sit down and I want to kill some goblins, like, I think that's awesome. I don't have a value statement on how people play. I just think about this stuff all the time because it's of a deep meaning to me. I think it's important, and I want to try to help people understand this activity that's really more than an activity. It's not just a hobby. It can just be a hobby, but it's also it can be much more meaningful because we're seeing people come together in ways where they share things about themselves through their characters' actions. Now, we know, like, our characters are not perfect reflections of ourselves, but they carry a shadow of our behavior, whether it's I mean, sometimes I see players, they'll just put a little skin on top of their character and say, okay, I'm an elf, but they behave the same way they would in the real world. Or they bring in certain qualities of themselves. And that's the things that we can do when we're playing. So I want to reemphasize, because we have some new people in the audience joining us. I want to reemphasize. So this kind of takes it back to the top. Like, this is the whole theme of the discussion today, is that we think we play for certain reasons, and these are not bad. This is good. It's good to have reasons why you play role-playing games. It's fun. There's narrative enjoyment. There's killing monsters. There's leveling up. There's magic items. There's making new friends. Like, who wouldn't want to do that if you enjoy fantasy storytelling, sci-fi storytelling, adventure storytelling at all? Like, that's what I think. I think those are really enjoyable things. I want to know what you think. I'm curious if you're hanging out in the chat. Even if you're like, I'm lurking, I don't know what to say. Look, I want to know what you all have to say, because that's the reason I do these streams. I don't do it to sit here and just hear myself talk. I want to do it to engage people. So if you have something, you're like, hey, I want to throw something out there, or hey, Adam, I don't know if you might be a little off base. Please throw your thoughts out there, because that to me is what makes this beneficial. So I threw out here why I think we play, and they're all good reasons. And I think there's other reasons why we actually play. There's the idea that we play for fun, absolutely, because human beings need fun. We need to find ways to engage with that side of our lives, but we also play for self-discovery. We play for development of social skills and confidence. We try to grow personally. We want to develop our personal selves. And that's really what Campbell talks a lot about in Mythology. Is Mythology really provides that vehicle for us. And even if we can't do it in our own lives, or we can't overcome those personal challenges where, like, we personally, like, I can't go and become, like, not everyone needs to live the hero's life of not even everyone needs to be Hercules. Not everybody needs to be some archetypal hero that goes and does something incredible. But it gives us the sense of what that looks like. And it gives us a sense of how we could maybe in some way grapple with that in our own lives. Religious mythology does this. And that's actually why I've started reading the Bible a lot more over the last year, mainly because I started realizing that is a mythological document at its core. And I don't want to get into weighing in on spirituality and faith. That's not the intent. But when I look at it and I read it for my own personal reasons, I see a story that can help me and other people. And there are other religious texts throughout the world that help people understand, what does it mean to be a person? And how do you grapple with this idea of, I'm alive, I'm a human being, I have struggles, I have challenges, and I don't want to face those. That's terrifying. That's the dragon. Unshaped fear. That's what it is. And then how do you face that? Well, I can't face that individually. What's up, man? Hey, what's up, Troy? Good to see you, buddy. I'm glad you're joining. If you have thoughts, I know you always have some great stuff to say. If you have anything to weigh in on this, please let me know. Feel welcome to drop it in the chat. So there's this. There are things in our lives. There are forces and fears that we have. So we give them shape. We give them the idea of being a monster. We make them take shape in our own psyche. And then we find ways to grapple with those. And that's what mythology does. Mythology gives us the ability to grapple with those things, because we can understand a story, but it's hard to understand your own fears. And so when you come into the table and you're trying to grow socially, you're trying to develop your personal skills, you can use the idea of an avatar interacting in this mythology to practice interacting with some of the fears you may have in your own world and in your own life. And that's not saying that role-playing has to be therapeutic. Like, I think the worst thing in the world would be to come to a table with like 6 players who are like, I have deep traumatic problems that I'm going to take out on this table right now, and nobody's going to get a chance to know what's going on except me, and we're going to deal with it immediately. And, tough crap. I think that could be a really dangerous situation. That's not what I'm encouraging. And hey, we all have things in our lives that we're working on. So it's not to say like, hey, if you have stuff you're working on, don't go to the table. I think that's many of the reasons why we go to the table, is to work on different elements of ourselves. But be conscious of those when you sit down at the table, because what I've seen a lot of players do when they sit down is it can go one of two directions. It can be very positive, or it can be a negative outlet for those types of challenges we work on in our behavior. So I want to return to this theme I mentioned earlier. Like, so how we address, how your avatar addresses these challenges in the game world is really important. So as a new player, having the idea and understanding in your head that you might be playing for fun. You're playing to kill monsters, but you're also doing this other thing. Like you're doing this other thing that's really old. You're doing this thing that's really traditional. And you're doing this thing that is going to connect you to people. And it's got something else there. That mythology, that other thing that is there is going to, you're going to participate in it. And you have the opportunity, and you may just do it subconsciously, to fight some of those monsters or dragons, the things that are in your subconscious, the things that you don't tell anybody that you're really working on, the things you're like, I really want to work on this. My thing that I wanted to work on for the longest time was I wanted to be more confident. I was very tall when I was younger, and I'm still tall. I'm 6'2", but I was tall way before everybody else was tall. So I was awkward. I had facial hair before everybody. I looked like a man when I was in like 7th grade. So that was a very awkward thing for me to be in my own life. And what I had to do was figure out how to deal with that, as we all do. We all have to figure out how to deal with our own lives and how to deal with those fears that we have. And my fear was just talking to people and being confident. And it took a long time. It took a long time of consciously forming this fear, recognizing that the fear was in my mind, that nobody really cared what I looked like or what I sounded like if my voice cracked all the time, but that it was there and I was worried about it. And that was something that gave me a sense of tremendous fear. And then I then had to face it. And so that connects to my analysis of why did I like role-playing games so much when I was a younger kid? Why did I love mythology so much? Because it gave me an expression of those fears. I didn't have to tackle my own social fears directly, but I could see how characters in Lord of the Rings formed bonds of friendship, how they supported one another. And I could say, okay, I see that. I understand that. That makes sense to me. And then my brain would do some jujitsu with it and figure out how to integrate that into my own life. So I didn't have to face my own fear. I could face the fear of Frodo and Sam, and I could see what loyalty looked like, and I could see how people would work and support one another. And then I could integrate that into my own sense of being. So I want to sort of wrap this up, because this turned into me talking, and I don't know if I was rambling. I guess I was kind of rambling, but I hope it's been beneficial. I always appreciate insights, anything that you want to throw in. If you want to follow me on Instagram, that's where I do a lot of outreach in terms of trying to gauge the pulse of where people are at, so I can figure out how to support them. If you want to follow Twitch, that'd be super awesome, because we do stuff like this more. I'm doing this more regularly, and we're also having more groups on Twitch. We're gonna be showing newer players in groups practicing a lot of the things that we're talking about and that I discuss, and soon other shows are going to be discussing on the D&D Club Twitch stream network. So give us a follow on Twitch, or give us a follow on Instagram if that's something where you just think that might be up your alley. Let's close this out. So this is where did it go? So the hero, this is in Campbell's work, and he's kind of dissecting ideas of the hero and like, what is the hero? Why are we attracted to the hero? And what is the hero all about? And the hero is the person who, according to Campbell, is a person of self-achieved submission. And then he says, but submission to what? And it's the idea of our fears, that the heroes in these stories, they face their fears directly. They submit to them, and they understand that they are real and present and right there in their face, and they attack them head on. And Campbell then talks about how this idea of, in humanity, this idea of birth and coming to being is what creates something new. And that when we face our fears, when we face them directly and indirectly through mythology, when the heroes face their fears, something new emerges from that. And that is actually a timeless human cycle of us trying to figure out who we are and what we are afraid of, and then figuring out how to conquer that. And then lastly, it's this idea of the transfer from external to the internal. So these external things we are afraid of, and these external interactions, we then eventually realize that we turn the focus on ourselves. And that's where we find, and I love the way he expresses this, this is where we find all the ogres and secret helpers of our childhood. That's where we find the things that have taken shape when we were younger that gave us either expressions of our negative fears or of our hopes for ourselves. I want to close with this, because this is something I read, and Campbell quotes Toynbee, a historian who has his own faults, but this is, I think, a wonderful quote. And it kind of connects to this idea of our childhood and where we find these fears and the monsters and the heroes of our childhood. It's where we find when we go to this place of ourselves, of the internal. And I think this is where we could really improve in our ourselves as individuals by turning our focus on our internal self. And we can do that through role playing. We can actually turn the lens inward and say, what can I work on? And Toynbee says, the internal is where we find all the life potentialities we never managed to bring to adult realization. This just jumped off the page. I read it like 5 or 6 times. We never managed to bring to adult realization those other portions of ourselves. They are there. Those portions of ourselves are still there, for such golden seeds do not die. And I read that and I was like, oh my God. It almost hit me in the face. I had to like stop reading. It made such an impact on me because I realized I feel like that is the transcendent thing that we all struggle with. We all have this golden seed of ourselves and who we want to be and who we envision ourselves to be. And our entire life is spent trying to find it, trying to plant it and let it grow. And many of the things that we face in our world as we get older, they might be obstacles we have put in our own way or things we would rather deal with than having to bring that golden seed into fruition. The last part here is it says, if only a portion of that lost totality could be dredged up into the light of day, we should experience a marvelous expansion of our powers and life. And that, to me, is why using this introspective approach to character building can be so powerful. Because once you get in touch and start looking at the self, start looking at your own internal monsters and hopes and heroes, and start to recognize, you don't have to bring them directly to the table, but look at how those can connect to your characters and how those can connect to your behavior at the table. You may be able to connect with those golden seeds of your life, those golden seeds that have not died, that are still within all of us. And I believe they're in every single one of us. Those golden seeds that do not go away. They are just buried under the lost potentialities of our life that we're trying to find once again. All right. I think that was good. Good for today. My name's Adam Scott. I appreciate you joining us. If you have any questions or things that you want to jump in on, take a look on our profile. Let me actually here. I'll drop our Discord link here in the chat. Feel welcome to join us on the Discord. We've got a large community of people in there who like to dialogue about this and connect with one another, and along this continuing journey that we all have in life as we explore our fascination with mythology and our own humanity and our own selves. So my name is Adam Scott. I appreciate you being here for D&D Club. I am out. Have a great rest of your day.